And welcome to the Real Estate Edition of That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business. Each new episode airs Thursday morning, 9 a.m. on thatbusinessnetwork.com. And check out the new site, TampaBayREO.com, which goes along with this site that's in addition to thatbusinessnetwork.com, which is the show's regular site for all the different entrepreneurs and business professionals that we talk to each and every week. If you'd like to come onto this program, visit tbsinterview.com for more information. Today I want to talk about the life of an REO agent versus the life of a traditional agent. So this is all about REO from the agent's interior perspective. This isn't really about so much what the public sees. This is behind the scenes of what an REO agent does and how this business differs from traditional real estate. When I started in real estate 10 years ago now or so, I had no intention of ever getting into foreclosure sales, and I had no idea what the business even entailed. I was finishing up a degree in finance at the University of South Florida and wanted to be a commercial real estate agent. I went to I bounced around from a couple of different offices before landing in the office that I'm at right now and went there to interview for a commercial real estate position. I met, and at the same time, though, I interviewed with the residential real estate broker, met a girl by the name of Amanda Huggins, who went on to become my mentor in foreclosures. I chose foreclosures over commercial at that time because I had seen what Amanda had done in the business. And she offered to, basically take me in her wing as a buyer agent and, get me off the ground. One of the most difficult things about starting in real estate is having that sphere of influence, or having, the sphere of people to sell to, getting the leads in, basically. And so I knew that through foreclosures, she as the listing agent, she was generating a lot of buyer leads. And so I went into it for that particular reason. Did pretty good with it for the first couple of months, strictly from the buyer's side, and decided I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn how to list and get, REO listings as well. And that's one of those areas when you ask an REO agent, how do you get listings? Teach me how to be an REO agent. And that's kind of the gray area there in real estate, that they don't want to teach you what they know, because in essence you're asking them, help me compete with you. and so I always laugh every time an agent asks me, how do I do what you do? How do I source the business that you source? So I'll talk a little bit about it today. I'll go into a little bit of detail. We'll go into a whole lot of depth about how I get every type of listing, but I will tell you a little bit about what it is to be an REO agent and why it's such a nice position to be in real estate. And so for a couple of months I worked with Amanda as a buyer agent, and after a little bit of discussion, she agreed to teach me the ways of the REO agent from a listing perspective. And I was able to go out and source my own listings through her reputation and her brand's reputation, which is Tampa Bay REO, the site that I have to this day. And fortunately enough for myself, this was in 2007, later or early 2008, and I was still a little bit late to the game, but I wasn't so late that I couldn't still get into the business. Nowadays, it's almost impossible, and there's not a lot of inventory out there right now for foreclosures, although there's good evidence that a second wave of REO is around the corner within the next couple of years. And so some of this information in this video may help you prepare ahead of time to get some of those listings. And so I began to train with Amanda. And one of the first things about being an REO agent is you're going to have capital available to pay bills on behalf of the bank and submit for reimbursement. That's one of the biggest differences between a traditional real estate agent and a foreclosure sales agent. Traditional real estate agents aren't going to pay expenses on behalf of their seller and submit them for reimbursement. That happens on the corporate side, like I said, with the banks or investment groups where they're selling vacant homes and they want the homes to have utilities on and the lawn maintained. So that becomes the listing agent's responsibility. And when you only have a couple of properties, not too big of a deal, but when you start getting into 100, 200, 300, and at one point I and the rest of the group was managing nearly 500 REO listings, of which about 300 had some type of billing aspect associated with it. And so I had to manage all the power bills, the water bills, contractor bills, and I'll talk a little bit about what all that entails here in just a moment. But so you got to have a large amount of operating reserves to pay the bills. Another thing is the utility companies. You got to learn the ins and outs of the different utility companies, and also the deposits that are required. The deposits alone will eat up a lot of your capital. And so if you're going to get into heavy REO listings, you want to look into getting utility bonds. Utility bonds will basically insure the utility provider against default on your utility account, and will save you the deposit charge. And those range depending on the utility provider and the amount of the bond that is necessary. Myself, it's about $1,200 a year for 4 different utility providers that I have in the area, and they're specific to the different utility companies too. And so in the areas that I cover, there's probably 20 or 30 different utility providers, but the 4 main ones are the ones that I keep utility bonds on. And it's nice to be able to call up and get a utility turned on quickly. They associate your account with a tax ID or business tax ID, and I don't know if you remember turning on a utility account, but they take you through a long setup and questionnaire. Once you establish a utility bond, the process oftentimes is much quicker. So having utility bonds will save you the deposits, but keep in mind it's a trade-off. You can still, your deposits come back to you. You don't submit deposits for reimbursement when you pay the bills for the bank, so they don't reimburse your deposit. That's money you've got to have available, and that's a relationship between you and the utility company. And so the utility bond then helps save you that excess operating capital, but it becomes an expense of your business. So some people will say, I don't want the utility bonds, I'd just rather pay the deposit. It's money out, but it's money back in. And for people that have excess cash, then that's probably the route that they would go to. But it also creates accounting headaches for REO agents, especially if you're doing your own accounting. Final bills being taken out of the deposit can sometimes cause headaches with the banks and getting them reimbursed, because a lot of times those bills don't come until months after a closing, and after an REO closes. Typically, the bank wants the final bills within 15 to 30 to 45 days max, and if the bills aren't there, you eat the money. And that's one thing you also got to realize about being an REO agent is if you're doing a high volume of REO properties, you're going to eat a lot of money, and you're going to make a lot of money on the flip side, which is good. But you got to learn to just take some of the hits with the business. There will be times when banks will refuse to reimburse you. There'll be times when they will, something internal on their end will cause a delay or a missed reimbursement. A lot of times, if you bring it to their attention, they'll pay you. But if it's been too far after the closing, they're restricted from paying you. The books are closed on that particular asset, and their accounting system won't even allow checks to be written on behalf of that asset anymore. And so you can only raise so much hell over a few $100 or whatever the case may be, because the particular client keeps feeding you listings. And so that's just part of what comes with the business. You have to learn to accept the losses with the gains. And the better bookkeeper you are, or the better bookkeeper that you have, that's one of the areas I always like to do. It's one of the areas where I probably should delegate more, but I like actually keeping the books and doing the reimbursements and knowing exactly where all the money is and what is due, and it enabled me to really keep a lot of the money. But nonetheless, through the last 10 years, I can easily say I've probably been burned $40,000, $50,000, if not more. So I don't have a completely accurate estimate of it anymore through the years. And the first couple of years was kind of hectic, as I had to learn a system to account for all of this money. Plus, I had to do the job of listing the property, and so this was a whirlwind in the first couple of years, just learning how to handle 300, 400, and 500 different listings between myself, and then I did the other groups billing and the utility functions. And so that alone really puts a lot of excess pressure on an REO agent. Oftentimes you'll ask, or you'll attempt to contact an REO agent that you can't get a hold of them. They don't answer their phone. They don't return phone calls. It's because they really don't consider themselves a lot of times traditional real estate agents. It's almost like they're employed by the banks. They'll have a buyer agent give you a call back, or an assistant. It can be very difficult talking to the person who is at the helm of the listing. And sometimes the person whose name on the listing isn't really even associated with the asset in any capacity. That happened in our market with Ocwen listings. The person's name who's on the listing wasn't an agent in our market. He was a licensed agent, or else he could have had his information in a multiple listing service, but he was actually an employee of Ocwin at the time, and so their listings went into the multiple listing service. And if you try to call the listing agent, the number went to a voicemail every single time. They had an 800 number call center that you're supposed to call for assistance. But as many people are familiar, Ocwin, which is now Hubzu, is not a very user-friendly experience for buyers or real estate agents. And us REO agents dislike them as well. They always they were one of the early ones to branch off from using real estate agents to sell their properties, and created their own internal system. And they've really never received any type of raving reviews from anybody, from buyers, investors, realtors, and even consumers who are having their mortgages serviced by them. They are just a train wreck. It's incredible to think how that company even does the volume that it even does with the reputation that it has. And that company founded, actually in Orlando by an entrepreneur. The name Ocwin actually coming from New Company is how that name came about. Just a little side story to the business when he started the company. But it has grown tremendously through the years, and has since changed. I think it's actually Altisource now, and then they sell their properties through Hubzu.com. Nonetheless, when you sell bank-owned properties, you got to have a lot of capital to pay the bills, submit them for reimbursement. You got to wait on those reimbursements anywhere between 10 14 days for the ones who reimburse quickly, upwards of 3 and 4 months. In a couple of years past, the reimbursement timeframes have gotten tremendously better. But for the first few years, when you're carrying hundreds of listings, keep in mind that your bank or your servicer was carrying tens of thousands of listings, and their people were very much weighted down. And so reimbursements took much longer then. There were a lot more mistakes, a lot more errors were made, and a lot more money was lost through the pipeline. Today, it's not as problematic, but for a new agent, it can be when they're learning how to account for a lot of cash flow, both going in and out of their company. So that's one of the ways REO agents differ from traditional real estate agents. When I come back from the break, we'll go into some other areas of this topic. So keep in mind, new episodes each Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on thatbusinessnetwork.com. And also keep an eye on our real estate site at Tampa Bay, reo.com, for new listings in the Tampa Bay area, and all the real estate that is bank-owned available on the homepage as well. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
And we're back to the real estate edition of That Business Show 2.0. I'm Jamie Maloney, your host, with new episodes each Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on thatbusinessnetwork.com. Also, please like our Facebook page, which is associated with the real estate show. That's facebook.com/Tampa Bay REO. It's titled Jamie Maloney Real Estate, Tampa Bay REO, coming from the name of the website, which is associated with foreclosures. REO standing for Real Estate Owned. It's an acronym that was mostly an insider term up until this real estate downturn that started in 2008. I shouldn't really call it a downturn now, but when the foreclosure started hitting the market, REO became associated with foreclosure, which is what it was, and more people picked up on that term. And so I think it's pretty much understood by many people in the business now, and even outside the business, that REO means foreclosure. But in short, it just means real estate that the mortgagee owns versus the mortgage that is being serviced. And so once the property is foreclosed, they take ownership of it, and it's handled in a different department. When you're making payments on the property, it's being serviced by your mortgage loan servicer. And then if you go into default, or if you're looking for a short payoff, it goes into the loss mitigation department. They're the ones handling people in collections and in default and workout solutions. And then if it goes into foreclosure, it goes over to the REO department for asset managers to hire their agents or put the properties in pool sales, or however it is that they choose to disseminate their listings at that point. So let's talk about another area where REO agents differ from traditional real estate agents, and that's in property preservation. Another big business, a big area of the business is in property preservation. When an asset is signed, the first duty of the listing agent is to check the occupancy of the home. Probably in our market, it's about 50-50 on occupied or not. Just because the property is foreclosed does not mean the prior person living in the property has vacated the home. And you can have two different type of people in the home. You can have the prior owner living there, or you can have a tenant, somebody that is renting the property from the prior owner. Or you can have the third type of squatter, which is, somebody who's just, has broken into the home and is staying there at their own convenience. You can typically chase those people off just by telling them to leave. Owners, on the other hand, and tenants have certain rights, and those rights used to be protected by a federal law called the Protecting Tenants in Foreclosure Act. That law actually sunsetted a couple of years ago, but signed in 2009 by Barack Obama. That lasted up until, I think, the end either 2014 or 2015. Today, there is no federal law protecting tenants in foreclosure. Now, different states have enacted similar policies, including Florida, which has a similar law or a similar language to what the Protecting Tenants in Foreclosure Act entailed, but it's not as protective as the federal law had. What it does is, if it's a bona fide tenant inside of a property that is there, at an arm's length transaction from the owner, then they have certain rights to remain in the property for a certain duration of time. And in Florida, I think it was, actually I'm not even certain under the new law, it's not usually invoked, but under the old law, I think it was 90 days that they could remain in the property, or they could remain in the property paying rent under the lease agreement. There was a lot of gray area inside the law, and even the banks didn't really want to get involved in the tenants being basically their own tenant inside the property. And so what happened as a result of that is the value of cash or keys went up. They began offering more money to get the banks to go, or to get the tenants to leave the property. And so as a listing agent on the property, if there is a tenant in the property, that's your first duty of business, is to offer them cash or keys. And the same with owners. With some exceptions, there are a few banks that do not offer cash or keys to the owners because they're already in default to their lender. Why are they going to pay them money when they've been chasing them for money? So it's not very common that that's the case, but there are a couple of banks that won't pay cash or keys to owners. Depending on your market, the value of cash or keys could be anywhere between $500 to $10,000 or more, and I've even heard of payouts as upwards of $50,000. In determining the cash or key amount, what they take the value of the property, and they usually make a determination based on that. I always recommend that tenants counter the offer when I'm not personally working with them, just when I'm giving advice in general like this. You can counter the offer. Many times they will come up. Don't just counter it to counter it, though. Show the the need for the funds, show them the movie cost, show them where you're going, show them the more documentation you can provide when dealing with a bank, the better off that you're going to be in getting the result that you want. If you just simply ask for something without documentation, and this is true during contract and escrow and offer, if you can document items, they're much more likely to accept, because banks work off of logical reasons, not emotional reasons. And there are somebody working from 9 to 5 each day, and they want to do right by both their client, but also by the person purchasing the property. They're essentially neutral in that sense. And so we determine the occupancy of the property, and at that point we'll offer them cash or keys. So this comes back to what I was talking about earlier, in that you got to have a lot of operating capital to become a listing agent, because they expect you to front the money oftentimes. Now, as the last few years have gone by, the banks have allowed that they will front the checks themselves and overnight them to the listing agents, but a lot of them still don't. They expect the agents to pay the cash to the occupants, then submit them for reimbursement. And keep in mind, all of these reimbursements are reimbursed dollar for dollar. There is no interest paid, there's no service paid, there's no mailing, overnight service fees, none of that stuff is paid. So it's actually a losing area of the business for the real estate agent, because then on top of that, you've got the time that you are spent documenting and accounting for all funds. And so, but the trade-off is that the bank gives you a lot of listings, and so they've come to expect that agents, and ultimately the agents have performed in doing the accounting functions for the bank and taken the huge burden of utility and expense management off of the banks. Can you imagine, being a servicer in Texas and having properties across 50 different states and calling the different utility companies in the different states to try to activate the utilities? Some of the utility companies require you to be members, they require formal applications, deposits. They don't always make it easy. They require you to be on site a lot of times if it's a gas activation. And so the agents make that much easier for the banks by simply handling the utility functions and the expense management for the banks. And then when the occupants do not perform, let's say they are non-responsive or combative, and then that's rare in our market. I've had a few combative tenants in my time, but most of them are at the point by the time that the agent shows up, especially the owners, they know that they are at the end of the rope. That's been in Florida, anywhere between 1 and 3 years to get somebody out of the property. And so during that time, they've lived there for free. They've went through the different, emotions of denial and frustration, anger. They're finally at acceptance by the time that you show up. And then when you offer money on top of that, they're usually happy to take that and leave. Tenants, a little bit of a different story. A lot of times they feel like victims because the landlord didn't tell them that the property was being foreclosed. They want to know what law has been broken, how can they be compensated. But ultimately that type of dispute lies strictly between the landlord and the prior owner and the tenant. And there is no law that really protects tenants against landlords that are not making their payments. If you look at the standard landlord-tenant agreement, there's nothing in there that says the landlord agrees to continue making payments to the bank or that they own the property outright. And so you as a tenant just have to do your own due diligence and ask questions, look in public records to see if there's a lis pendens filed against the property. But even then, a lis pendens isn't filed for 3-4 months, even sometimes longer, when a borrower begins missing their payments. And so there is no foolproof way to protect yourself from a borrower default as a tenant. You just got to exercise caution, and it's probably more advisable to go through a property management company, and that's a more stable situation than just a random homeowner here and there. And by all means, please stay off of Craigslist. I've seen more and more scams and problems as a result of tenants renting properties through Craigslist by scam artists who are breaking into properties, rekeying them, putting them up for rent on Craigslist, with some cheap rent to get you in there, get the cash and get out of there. And like I said, I've explained several stories on this program of having that happen before. But if the tenants or occupants don't move out, you've got to evict them. The bank handles that with their eviction attorney, but then you got to show up and handle the eviction, which point everything's moved out of the house and put on the side of the road, and the sheriff accompanies the agent to the property, and you remove the occupants from the home. And I've dealt with dozens and dozens of evictions through the year. Fortunately, not a lot of them go all the way to eviction, because I don't know what people are thinking when they turn down the cash or keys, and I guess they think they can somehow beat the eviction. I've had some interesting stories through the years with regard to that, but nonetheless, evictions are rare in the business, but nonetheless a part of the business and can be a dangerous area of the business. If you've got a combative tenant, sometimes these people do not want to go. And just a couple of years ago in St. Petersburg, an eviction led to an officer shooting. That wasn't a foreclosure eviction, though. That was a landlord-tenant situation where the landlord was evicting a tenant. But evictions, nonetheless, are contentious situations, and the tenants are not always cooperative. And so real estate agents need to exercise caution, as that's just one of the risks of being a bank-owned agent. But having to manage the eviction process and then all the stuff that's taken out of the house is another area of the property preservation. If the property is vacant or after the eviction, all that debris has got to be cleaned up by a contractor. Some banks utilize field asset services or field service management companies. Others rely on the agents to hire their own local contractors. That was more the norm prior to 2010 and 11, but nowadays most of the field asset services are controlled by 3 major companies. And if you're a contractor, I'll fill you in on those when we come back from the break. So some good information right there to pick up some side business, or to let your contractor friends know about how that business works in the bank-owned property business, and also go a little bit more into what it means to be in property preservation with the bank-owned properties. You're listening to the Real Estate Edition of That Business Show 2.0. I'm your host, Jamie Maloney, and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Real Estate Edition of That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business. Today's program, we're talking about the life of an REO agent, how this differs from traditional real estate agents. And we're talking right now about property preservation. I was talking about how, when the property is assigned, you go to the property, you determine occupancy, you deal with the occupants via cash or keys or an eviction. At that point, the goal is to get the property vacated as soon as possible, because the banks don't want to be in a position of liability with somebody in the property that could, have any type of claim against them as now the legal owner of the property. And so after that, the next steps are to secure the property. And so that's another bill that an REO agent is going to incur, the securing bill called the rekey. And that's typically $100 to $300 out of your pocket, depending on how many doors there are or any windows that are broken. And they also have to trash out the property, as we call it, remove all the debris from inside the home. And in the case of the eviction, if it's put on the side of the road, and then also to clean the home. And so all of those costs are anywhere between $500 and $1,000 on a typical property that's 1,500 square feet on average. And so that's why, like I said, REO agents need to have a lot of capital on hand to support their business. And then from there, the bank will determine if the property is something that they want to market either repaired or as is. Most of them leave it as is, but some of them will do repairs. It's going to depend on what market they're in, and really the recommendation of the agent in conjunction with their own marketing plan. The primary thing that they do in our market, they'll do carpet and paint. They'll almost always handle any type of safety hazards that are associated with the property, and so we are always held liable for making sure we report any and all safety problems to the bank. They want to have no problems with safety, making sure the smoke detectors are installed, make sure the handrails are in place, make sure there's no unsecured openings off high rises or second stories that are not secured properly. Pools are a huge liability for the banks, and so oftentimes they want those completely secured and enclosed off to where nobody can fall into those. And pools are a big challenge for banks, because to put a pool cage over the pool gives them the most protection against any accidents and liability, but it hurts the marketing of the home. And the trade-off is to have the pool up and running and functional, but then somebody could fall into the pool and it's a liability. And so banks hate to acquire properties when they have a pool due to those liability reasons. But depending on the property, depending on the bank, sometimes the pools are maintained, sometimes they are not. Typically, though, a pool startup for a pool that has been sitting green for 6 months to a couple of years is at least $2,000. You almost always need a new pool pump and pool filter. And so $2,000 to $3,000 in startup costs, and then pool maintenance, which runs anywhere between like $80 and $150, depending on who you hire out there to maintain the pool. So just another cost that the REO agent has to incur. Another big part of being an REO agent is all the different reports that we have to do. The most common report that you hear about is the BPO, the broker price opinion. That is similar or pretty much the same thing as a CMA that residential or traditional retail agents refer to, but a BPO, standing for broker price opinion, is the industry norm, and there's an approved residential BPO form that goes out on all the properties. Some of the banks use their own proprietary systems, and that's another big challenge in being an REO agent, is learning the different platforms, logins, and different compatibility with different not search engines, but different browsers. I myself, and this is where I've talked a couple times on the program, RoboForm comes in handy. I highly recommend that password manager program, because it automatically will redirect you to the site that you need to go to, input your username, it'll input your password, and it'll automatically log you in. And when you're a bank-owned property agent, I know I have about probably 200 to 300 logins that are in some way related to some bank portal or some BPO portal login. And so RoboForm, an excellent tool to help you with password management. It was a lifesaver years ago. I remember going to an REO conference in South Carolina, and if nothing else that I got out of that conference was somebody was complaining about having to remember all these different passwords and websites, and somebody told us about RoboForm. And this was back in 2009 when people weren't as savvy and up to date on different applications, and we were all beginning to just discover some of these great programs to make our lives easier. But write that one down. That helps you in any business right there. RoboForm.com. For like $50 a year, you can have all your passwords managed, stored in a login, and then easily remembered all. And it's also transferable through RoboForm everywhere when you go to computer. Very great little application. Also, each month the banks require monthly status reports to be completed. They'll call them monthly marketing reports. That's when they review for their price reductions. Typically, when a bank prices the property, they want to keep it that way for 30 days. Have a monthly marketing report done that talks about the number of showings and the feedback that is coming in on the home, and then they'll consider it for a price reduction at that point. Other things that the banks expect out of the listing agents are regular inspections. They can range anywhere from 1 week to 1 month in terms of a spacing between the inspections. And really all that is to make sure that the property is kept in a good condition, make sure there's no water leaks or any break-ins or any vandalizing. But it really takes a toll on the agent's time. And it's one of those things really that you want to delegate, and I delegated it 4 years when I had hundreds of different listings. But then you got to manage all of the platforms and the pictures and the portals that they go into. And so if you can get your property inspector to also upload the photos and do the reports, they typically don't always go hand in hand. The person who's a property inspector may not be as good with the technology, but ideally you'd want somebody that can handle the inspections from start to finish. But that there is another big time component in how REO agents differ from traditional real estate agents. Traditional real estate agents aren't doing any type of monthly marketing reports for their sellers. They're not doing any type of property inspections. They're not doing any expense management. And really their job is to market the property. And so much of marketing is done through really just putting the property in the multiple listing service, and then the computer through IDX technology disseminates it out to so many different websites. It makes you look like a rock star when really all you did was input it into the multiple listing service and order a sign up. That's really all what a lot of real estate agents do. Now the good ones go above and beyond that. They schedule open houses, they schedule broker opens, and they call their sphere of influence. And so those are the good real estate agents who are really making a push to sell the home. And for the homes that are unique, they have to do that. For the homes though that are conforming, they don't have to do that. The homes will sell themselves. And so that's just one of the things about real estate that has never really worked itself out. I say is real estate agents are always compensated the same percentage no matter how long the home takes to sell or whatever price point the home is priced at. It's always a percentage. It's never really a derivation of how much work that the real estate agent did on the home. But then again, how can you really accurately argue and arrive at a value at which both parties would understand? So that's one of the reasons why percentage of sales has always survived as the payment method for real estate agents. And I've talked about the conundrums inside real estate a number of times. The argument is, well, you sell the home for a higher price point, you get paid more money. Well, yes, that makes sense, but then the buyer's agent who also sells the home for more money gets compensated when in actuality they should be compensated for getting the home at a lower price than what is presented, because their buyer is who they represent, not the listing, not the seller in that situation. So there's a lot of different nuances about real estate that don't make sense. I've always said it doesn't take any difference between selling a $150,000 home and a $175,000 home, but you make more money selling a $175,000 home. Why? It's just priced more, and a percent of the sale is more because of that. Now I definitely understand there's a difference between a $100,000 home and a $1 million home in terms of marketing, but just some of the areas of real estate that even before I was a real estate agent didn't make sense to me, and it still doesn't make sense to me. REO agents compensated just the same way as listing agents. They're paid a commission based off the sales price. Oftentimes it is lower than the buyer's agent commission because the buyer's agent is who the bank actually wants to attract. They know that the listing agent is going to get property after property from them, and that they are going to be compensated over the long term. And so buyer agents are typically paid higher than the listing agents on these properties. So that's another reason why sometimes REO agents are not motivated per individual property, and they kind of put more of the work onto the selling agent because they know that they're making more of the money. I try not to behave in that manner. I try to make it 50-50 in terms of what is performed in the sale of the home. But nonetheless, that is also another way that REO agents and listing agents, traditional real estate agents differ, is how they get paid. The REO agents have really no negotiation power in the process. Those are approved commissions by the bank, and they are not going to approve any type of fees for processing fee or brokerage fees on top of that, which a lot of brokerages have. So they don't get that either, but they do get the volume. They're always competing in terms of units, but not necessarily dollar volume. And so while I've been on the Wall Street Journal list a number of times and a top core banker agent a number of times for units sold, I've never been there for dollar volume. You got to be there for dollar volume. You got to be selling higher price point homes, and then you work harder to sell more property, and then you do the less properties that are at a higher price point. But there are trade-offs even at that level. There's a different type of seller. When they're $1 million homes, banks behave in a certain manner. The sellers that are $1 million sellers behave in a certain manner, and certain expectations come out of that culture. When we come back from the break, I'll talk about how the offer system works and how that differs also with REO agents versus traditional real estate agents, and touch on a couple of other points too about the life of an REO agent on That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeagers. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeagers, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
We're back to the real estate edition of That Business Show 2.0. I'm Jamie Maloney, your host, and new episodes air each Thursday morning, 9 a.m. on thatbusinessnetwork.com. Also, our new site is up related to strictly real estate at TampaBayREO.com. That's in addition to thatbusinessnetwork.com, which is the General Show's website. So keep an eye on TampaBayREO.com for the latest in foreclosures in the Tampa Bay area, and you can search for real estate listings all across the state of Florida on that particular site. Also, if you're looking to get a home valuation, simply go to thathomevaluation.com and we'll get you over a free home valuation wherever it is that you are in the country. If you're in Tampa Bay, I can help you specifically. If you're not in Tampa Bay, we can get you help through our vast relocation and our referral network. So in today's program, we're talking about the differences between REO agents and traditional real estate agents. REO agents, it's a tough business to break into, but once you break into it, the number of listings that come through to you is basically put on autopilot, and then until that client either fires you or dries up or service releases the assets. And when I say service release, I mean they end up transferring what they have in their portfolios to another servicer, and it happens quite a bit. Years ago, we were working with about 45 to 50 different banks and servicers. Today, that number is down to less than 10. A lot of them are out of business, a lot of them have merged, and overall, the business is just changing. We're seeing smaller investment groups come into the marketplace and purchase portfolios of properties behind the scenes before they ever even get to the foreclosure process. They're picking up the servicing rates on the properties. They're doing their own workouts. They're doing their own short sales. They're doing their own foreclosures. They're also purchasing them up after foreclosure and picking up pools of property that way. But the future of the distressed business is simply going to be smaller investment groups, not the large major players. And so for years, the REO agents always sourced their properties from Equator.com, which originally was REO Trans, Res.net, which is still a player in the business, Pyramid platform, Pyramid.com, which is another platform that REO agents source their listings from. And a lot of BPO sites, people developed relationships through those. There's countless BPO sites that are out there, and that's a way to break in to the REO business, and a way that I recommend a lot of people practice, even in real estate right there, because it helps you learn to value properties, and you can get paid anywhere between $50 and $100 for BPOs. And all a BPO is where you drive by a property and take some pictures of the home, and then you do a drive-by valuation based on that. Now, sometimes the orders are interior orders, and they pay more money because you got to get interior access to the home to verify condition and room count. But there's a lot of drive-by BPO work out there. It's actually how, when I first started in REO, I supplemented my income and usually made me an extra $500 per week, and that was very conservative. There are people today that are making six figures in this business and have turned the business into a science because they know how to delegate to the photos with an inspection runner, get the pictures back to their team, and then input it and then get it off to the client. So you can do a BPO in as little as 15-20 minutes if you have the photos. And there are programs out there where you can simply input the listings via automation. You pull the listings, import it into a spreadsheet, and then export that to the program, and it inputs it into the different BPO forms. And so there are programs out there that'll automate the entire process. But being an REO agent also means you don't typically work with a lot of buyers. So traditional real estate agents work with both sellers and buyers, and they come into the market working primarily just with buyers and hope to get to becoming a listing agent. Becoming a listing agent is how any real estate agent is going to sustain their self in the business. Listing agents have the opportunity to earn both sides of the commission. A buyer agent only has the opportunity to earn one side of a commission. Also, as a buyer's agent, as an REO agent, the offers come to you, and this is true for both listing agents that are regular retail and REO agents. Once you take the listing, you only have to appease one person, that's your client, your seller. But if you're a buyer's agent, you've got multiple buyers that you're working with, and so you got multiple calls coming in, and you're trying to source and pick up so many different business from so many different places. Once you have these listings, you can just go through once a week and update all your sellers, in one day, and then essentially kick back and just go out and source more business or relax. And then another agent is out there selling your property. And that's the beauty of real estate. You can work from anywhere as a listing agent. If you're a buyer's agent, you can't, because you got to go show the properties. If you're a listing agent, you can source the properties, and then you can take a week and go somewhere else and then come back and try to source more properties. And you could be sitting on a beach negotiating an offer. Only thing you need is a Wi-Fi connection. And so that's one of the beauties of being a listing agent, and why so many people aspire to become strong listing agents. And so I always tell people who want to become strong listing agents, spend your time as a buyer agent, but begin to develop that market niche. Where is it that you're going to become an expert at? Where is your sphere of influence the heaviest at? Is it going to be defined around an entire county? Probably not as effective versus a neighborhood. Like if you define yourself as being, I am the sales professional of choice for Fishhawk Ranch, which is a big subdivision, but not so big that you can't be known as the neighborhood specialist. That's how I sold my first home in 2005 before I was ever a realtor, because I saw, a certain realtor's name on every single sign in the neighborhood, and I reached out to them, and they sold my home. But they were a neighborhood specialist, and they got listing after listing, and they never had to leave the community. REO agents differ from traditional real estate agents in that they have to go from county to county, and they're expected to cover a broad range of area. And that's not usually a problem. REO agents are kind of introverted, and they like to be left alone, and they like to spend some time in the car driving from different county to county. That's not usually a problem. Traditional real estate agents, it's hard pressed to get them sometimes to go across a bridge into a neighboring town, like between St. Petersburg and Tampa, or going north of Kennedy Boulevard or south of Gandy Boulevard in South Tampa. Real estate agents are kind of funny in that sense, but at the same time, they consider themselves localized market experts in just their own specific market. And if they become, satisfied with the amount of income and leads that they are producing, why go further? Everybody, sets their own goals in terms of how much production that they want to do. I myself love covering the different counties. I'll do 8 different counties, I think it is, here in the Tampa Bay region. It gives me some time to drive around, see the different areas of Florida. And in my primary area is Tampa, which is Hillsborough County, but we also go into Pinellas, which is St. Pete and Clearwater, among other cities. Also up into Pasco County. That's the trifecta of counties that is most popular in my market. But I get to spend time down in Manatee and Sarasota County, also over in the Polk, Hernando, Sumter counties, and so I get to see the different areas, different markets, and how they differ from the core market that I am exposed to in South Tampa. And so that's a big difference between REO agents and also traditional listing or traditional retail agents. REO agents also typically are very analytical. They're very systematic. They are people that they succeed because they put together processes and systems that simplify the entire process. Real estate agents, generally speaking, are not usually that type of people. Real estate agents have a terrible reputation in terms of follow-up, in terms of systemization, in terms of returning phone calls. All of those things make a lot of real estate agents, show in bad light. Now, I will say, 10 or 20% of real estate agents do a tremendous job, but due to low barriers of entry, there is a lot of agents that get into the business who otherwise should not be in the business. And so the ones who try to go into REO are the ones who actually get the listings from it, are, they don't survive in the business very long because they don't have that systems and processes type of mentality that is needed. Because keep in mind, when you're working with the banks, it's almost like you're an employee of their organization. It's not traditional real estate where you're truly on your own to do what you want. You're expected to answer the phone. You're expected to answer your email in a timely manner. And when you have carrying a heavy load of listings, those emails never stop coming in. At the peak of the REO business for me, I was getting on average 400 emails a day, and that was with assistants helping me too. So there's a lot of, and that's the only way they communicate too. That's another key difference, I should say, between REO agents and traditional agents. Is traditional agents like to get on the phone and talk. REO agents only want to talk via email. And we're seeing more of a change in general across all the boards with people not wanting to answer their phone, but more and more so getting off the phone, going to text and other forms of communication. But REO agents, it's always the best way to communicate with them through email. Including myself, email has always been my preferred method of communication. So I hope you got a lot out of today's program, the life of an REO agent, how we differ from traditional residential agents. I myself have sold over 2,000 foreclosed properties in the last 10 years. Business has slowed considerably though in REO, and I myself am having to transition, and I'm going down the commercial real estate path, which I mentioned at the top of the show, was what I wanted to do originally. And so the show will function more and more on commercial real estate here in the coming months as I begin to experience that side of the business much more. But whether or not you're selling a traditional home, buying a traditional home, or if you're an asset manager or an investment group involved with REO assets, please consider me your resource. And also, if you're involved with commercial real estate or leasing, please consider me a resource in that capacity as well. TampaBayREO.com is our website. Over there is my contact form that you can get in touch with me, and also view all of the area listings, including my own listings that are currently available for sale, both distressed and non-distressed. Again, TampaBayREO.com. And for a free home valuation, please visit thathomevaluation.com. Anywhere in the country, if you're in Tampa Bay, I can help you out. Other areas of the country, we can help you through our vast relocation and referral network. Tune in again Thursday at 9 a.m. to thatbusinessnetwork.com for new episodes of the Real Estate Edition. And the rest of the week, we air the regular That Business Show 2.0, where we talk with different business professionals. And we'd like to hear your story too. Visit tbsinterview.com for more information. Have a great day, everybody.